Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. It is the 1st of Alien April. I'm super excited about it.
Alien April. I love it. This is going to give us lots of fun material this month. Don't
And
worry if you're not
X,
just
this is
an
an
Alien fan. We've got other things too. So,
oh, we do, but this is just X. This is a little shout out to you for the month of April. I hope you enjoy. And
yeah, this
I
is
mean,
all for you, buddy.
we
All for
haven't
you.
heard from X in a long time, which
No,
is
I'm hoping they haven't returned back to Lanulus or wherever. Oh my gosh. Do you remember when we did last year April Fools?
yes,
We
yes,
did I told my flashlight story, which I
yep,
love telling every year. We had just recovered from Pensacon, I think,
yes.
because we had very sick people in the room with us when we recorded this, if I recall. And I had mentioned the giant penguin of Clearwater Beach.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the other hoax. We talked about another hoax, but those were the big ones. So if anybody wants to listen to that, I think that was episode 10. That's how long
Yes.
ago it was.
And we went over some of the fun hoaxes, which is interesting because I feel like we could do this every year and not run out of bizarre
Oh
hoaxes
God,
people
no,
did
yeah.
to get attention, right?
Even then, we were getting early emails and people were going, "Why didn't you mention this? Why didn't you mention that?" I'm like, "Well, good. We'll mention it next year." So one of the first ones I got, "Why didn't you talk about this?" is like, well, because honestly, I'd kind of forgotten about it. So we have to take the Wayback Machine to 1947, and we have to go to that town called Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And now there was an incident that occurred. I'm not saying that was a hoax, but what I am saying is that for 50 years, that thing was debated, and is still debated now, going on 70 years, and people are still coming up on 80. But in 1995, do you remember where you were in 1995, Erika?
Oh, wait, I have to do math. You put us in the Wayback Machine and I have to do math. So 1985 or 95?
95.
1995, I would have been math, let's see. Oh, I was partying like a rock star. No. I remember where I was in 1985. Why?
95, 95,
95.
95, 95.
Yes.
I was becoming a dad. That was when Beth was born. So my
Yeah, I
oldest
think
son.
I was a parent as well.
And Beau, our Clackety Clack producer, just said that they were a very, very, very small child. So that made just Erika and I age.
Yeah,
We looked
thanks.
like we just drank from the false grail in Last Crusade, and I just aged like 100 years there on camera. So
Yeah,
uh,
me too. Me
yeah.
too. Thanks, Bo.
Thanks, Beau. Thanks. That's okay. Callie wasn't even a twinkle in my eye at that point. So
Well, actually, 1985, I was not a parent. I might have been pregnant depending on what time of the year because my son, nope, I wasn't. I was still, yeah, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons like a rock. Anyway, where are we going with this, my friend?
well, there was a special that
Okay.
aired on television, hosted by my amazing, talented person that I would host every paranormal show for the longest time, and that was Jonathan Frakes.
Oh, I love Jonathan Franks. Yes.
Yes. And he released a very special on Fox television alien autopsy fact or fiction.
Oh, I remember this.
You remember
Yes.
this?
Yes.
There was this alien that was being dissected, and it was supposedly the Roswell footage, right? It shows this autopsy of these crazy things. And when you see them cutting into it and everything, it looks completely bogus. I don't know how anybody ever even considered this possibly real. He's holding the scissors like a tailor, not a pathologist.
Yeah.
And which they're supposed to be trained to put their middle finger on the bottom scissors holes and steady blades. No, it's completely crazy. And one of my favorite people in the world, Trey Stokes, who's a special effects wizard. He did Tales from the Crypt and a bunch of other things. He said that it looked like a dummy. It was rubbery, and it just was completely terrible. At the time, though, they played this like this was the be all end all. Several years, I guess, had built up of rumors of this tape existing, right? That's how they
Wow.
played it. They even talked about Hangar 18 at Wright Pat being the place where they were autopsied. Now, what was funny is when you look at the film now, it's so obviously staged and all that. We now know who built the corpse, the
Oh,
alien corpse, and that was a special effects guy from Manchester named John Humphreys. And he said that they actually destroyed the dummy after it was made because they didn't want it getting out.
oh,
Right?
wow.
He didn't realize that he was making it for a bit in another movie, and then it turned into this. And then he actually was like, I basically made it. You blow it up as large as you can, and you make that aluminum armature, cover it with clay, add in the details, and a latex cast on top. And he played himself as the pathologist in the film. It's crazy, right?
You can still see this. So we'll put a link to this because you can still watch this absolutely terrible thing.
Yeah,
Right.
it's so bad. And poor Jonathan Frakes. Yeah, he did that paranormal caught on tape before paranormal caught on tape. And it was a lot of fun. And this was one of the ones that he tried to sell as legit. And I'm like, oh dude, no, 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 no. So
Yeah.
now there were other previous alien hoaxes. Again, these are things we could delve into at some point. 1949, there was a sci-fi movie called The Flying Saucer that supposedly contained scenes of a captured spacecraft, and there was actually an actor playing an FBI agent who swears at the beginning of the movie this is all true. 1950, Frank Scully wrote the book Behind the Flying Saucers, and in it he says that U.S. has 3 Venusian spacecraft with humanoid corpses, and he had been sold the tale by 2 con artists who were trying to sell him oil as alien oil, and he believed it. So he actually published the book on that, and then before the men got arrested. And then in 1974, a guy named Robert Spencer Carr was actually trying to promote one of the crashes from Scully's book and claimed he knew where the aliens were stored. And of course, his son admitted, oh, his dad's insane and just likes making up stories. So anyway, so that's the alien autopsy. Oh my gosh. I remember watching it late one night and just whoo. So Wayback Machine again, man,
Okay.
we're gonna get it a lot of work today. The 4th of September, 1967. And
Okay.
early hours we're over in England, and the Royal Air Force has to scramble helicopters, and the Ministry of Defense, their intelligence branch, is mobilized because they were flooded with calls from the public discovering 6 flying saucers in a perfect line across southern England, all the way up to the Bristol Channel. So Scotland Yard bomb squad gets out there and
Okay.
checks one of the objects with X-ray equipment.
Wait a minute. If they're in the sky, how do they check it with X-ray equipment?
They crashed.
Oh, okay.
They crashed. So we got to figure out what these things are. Scotland Yard bomb squad hits it with X-rays. Ever ready batteries. Kind of a giveaway, not from Venus, not from Mars, not from another planet. So they were sent to Home Office, which is the Ministry of Defense. That's their secret base, right?
Okay.
And they study it and figure it out. And they found one of the saucers was at a place called Wiltshire, and they blew it up in a controlled explosion because they thought it might have been a bomb.
Wow.
Basically, their determination was obviously a very successful practical joke. the 1967 flying saucer hoax. Now, right before this, right, you got to remember 1967, literally weeks before this, Pink Floyd had released their Pipers at the Gates of Dawn album, right? So a bunch of apprentices at the Royal Aircraft Establishment and the technical college nearby basically put the saucers together to see if they could fly, and flew them. And that's where this hoax comes from. So 20 years, right? This was not known that it was a hoax
Wow.
because they didn't want to admit that they'd fallen for it. So
Well,
it wasn't until the 80s when they actually cleared the papers about it.
aliens are a real threat. And I just want to say, because you're talking about aliens thus far,
Yeah,
we already did an episode on this, but one of my favorite kind of hoaxes was War of the Worlds.
exactly.
Did that
That's,
here on our home turf. Like,
yeah.
you
And
know,
that's how people were falling for this stuff. But it wasn't, and that's the problem with hoaxes is for every good one that, gets out there and it's fun and it's done as a comedy thing and all that. The problem is that muddies the water for those of us trying to do real research, right?
yeah.
The things that we want to know. And the worst of the worst was probably a guy named Jerry Crew.
Okay.
Right? He fell for one. He was a bulldozer operator in 1958, and late one summer he came across some footprints in Bluff Creek area, Northern California,
Okay.
and he makes a plaster cast of one of the footprints that he found and showed it to reporters. He's holding the cast, and that becomes the iconic photo where they get the name Bigfoot. Right?
Oh, wow.
And suddenly he's sighted all over the Northwest. But the problem was that footprint, the Bluff Creek cast, I'm going to upset a few people here, was from a man named Ray Wallace. He made carved wooden feet, and he would jump around on the ground to create the tracks in that area. And what he did, I don't think he realized what he was doing. He was doing it to scare away vandals because they were messing with his logging equipment at night. So he put these big giant footprints out and about, making people think there was some sort of monster guarding his footprints. Talk about Scooby-Doo, right? This is, rather than just put up a sign saying no trespassing, I have a gun. He decides to come up with this, right? Now, the dude loved the outdoors. I got to talk to his son, Michael, at one point, who talked about his old man just having a great sense of humor and just loving practical jokes. That was his dad. And we shared stories. My dad was a big practical joker too. So, but those feet,
Uh-huh.
he gave them to his son, those fake wooden footprints. and that, those shoes, they are now on display at the Monsters and Mermaids Museum, which is a blast. I want to say that's in California, Northern California. Yeah, but that was, who knew that he was going to be creating this, right? And the fact that
Yeah.
he didn't do this for anything. He did this just to protect his stuff. And then he would tell ghost stories about the big monster that lived in the woods, or the giant bear. And who knew Bigfoot would become a thing?
True. True.
Now, does that mean all these other sightings in the area and other things are bogus? No. It just means we know this one was fake. And that's the problem with this stuff is we're doing this now, and we've got video footage just sent to us of a Bigfoot walking along a mountain range, right? That we've got to
Yeah.
get into and decide, is this real? Is this, a hoax? And these shoes are basically sandals. I will post the link to a picture that I took of them at that museum.
Well, when we first started our podcast, somebody had made Bigfoot shoes. Do you remember
Yeah, the
that?
cryptides, Yeah.
Yes, we desperately wanted a pair and they never sent them to us. But And we will throw that up there as well, because there were Bigfoot shoes that you could walk around in. And here's inherently the problem with situations, right? Where people can fake things that happen, because you see that all the time where people fake ghosts, or they fake Bigfoot, or they fake, different things like that. Like there was I think it was back in, I gotta look this up, because this was back in, I want to say 1917. That's when it was, right?
Yeah.
There was some photos where these little girls had found fairies that
And,
it
and
wasn't real.
yeah, no, it's total forced perspective photos and stuff like that. I remember we talked about some of the spiritualists, the Fox sisters. They admitted how they faked some things as they went on, where they were popping their bones to make the knocking sounds and stuff like that. Back in the Victorian times, later on, they would say, no, 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 we were real. We were forced to say that. But, were they? I mean, they were in Victorian dresses. It's pretty easy to cover yourselves to do that. And then, to even now, we've got YouTube psychics who have a big following that we know are using the same technique where they're popping their bones to make knocking sounds. And it's like, really, guys, you're going to try that? It's been done. I'm not naming names. I'm not jumping in on it, but those who Google it will know. And it's sad because it brings those of us looking for the real stuff. We have to go, ooh, we have to dig through all this garbage to get to the real stuff. But some of it, I enjoy the hoaxes too, because they become folklore. They become part of the story, and why they are what they are. And one of my favorites, I'm going to do this one before we go to the break. This one's in Germany, and this is probably one of the earliest ones where somebody got in trouble by believing a hoax, right? May 31st, we're going way, way back machine. May 31st,
Wow.
1725.
Ooh.
Okay. This guy named Berenger, Johann Bartholomeus Adam Berenger. He's a professor at the University of Würzburg,
Ooh.
and he was
Mouthful.
collecting fossils in what is now Bavaria.
Okay.
And he had hired local teenagers to help him expand his operations. Mistake number one. Right? Um, and some of his assistants bring him 3 stones that seem to have some strange fossils in them.
Ooh. Dun, dun, dun.
And they were like worm-like creatures on 2 of them. And then the third
Okay.
one almost looked like the sun. It was a very, sun type shape. And they were kind of exposed in bas relief, so kind of the half fossil stuff.
Got it.
And so as he goes on, more and more things he finds, like spiders on webs and birds sitting on eggs, and then 2 frogs having sex. You'd think at some point he'd start going, huh?
Yeah, I
Stones
would
start
think
coming
so.
out showing the stars, the moons, letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And instead of going, wait a minute, guys, what are you bringing me? He rushes and writes a paper on this. And I cannot pronounce the name. It's like the lithography, Wisbergenos, whatever. But it's basically, this is what happens when somebody who is an academic and is just so excited to now have a paper in his name instead of studying what he should be studying, instead of debunking this stuff. So here's the introduction. I love this quote. Behold these tablets, which I was inspired to edit, not only by my tireless zeal for public service, but my strong filial love of Franconia, to which from these figured fruits of this previously obscure mountain, no less glory will accrue from this than delicious wines of its vine-covered hills.
Okay.
How beautiful is that for your academic paper?
I
Great
appreciate the
stuff.
academic paper of that. Yes.
So he thought this was going to be his ticket to scholarly stardom, right? He's,
Uh-huh.
and it, immediately the other scientists in the area are like, these are pretty unsophisticated. This is just carvings, right?
Right.
Also, a friend of his was writing a paper saying, I got to debunk this, dude. And he's like, he writes, this is, and again, this guy is really good with language. My colleague has threatened to write a small treatise exposing my stones as supposititious. Thus does this man, virtually unknown among men of letters, still but a novice in the science, make a bid for the dawn of his fame in a shameful calumny and imposture.
Jesus, that's a lot of words. That's a
So,
lot.
so of course, the truth comes out at a formal hearing, and a geological professor and a librarian basically turns out that they had totally orchestrated it, right? And they had paid one of his assistants to scatter them all over the mountains just to show how much of a windbag this guy was.
Oh my gosh.
And so there you go. It worked because the guy could not find it. It was irresistible. And that's what I think we all fall for at times. We want that truth so much. That's why we fall for the hoaxes. That's why these YouTubers that are just trying to get the clicks, they're no longer looking for evidence. They just want the clicks. And that's what we've got to avoid. Oh, that's exactly all the way back in 1700s. And now here we're falling for it today. But when we come back, gang, we're going to get into some of the fun hoaxes I think you'll enjoy. And I do want to go back into our giant penguin because I have a little more on that I didn't get to talk about last year. So
Nothing but penguins, my friend. We'll be back after our sponsors.
most know Florida as the land of endless sunny beaches, but the state is home to numerous eerie legends and mysterious creatures. The Everglades is home to the elusive skunk ape. In Key West lies an uncanny doll reputed to have a life of its own. Join Mark Muncy and illustrator Carrie Schultz as they uncover the history behind the state's creepiest stories in unusual locations. The Dark Side of the Sunshine State, presented in Eerie, Florida, from History Press.
Prepare to be devoured. The Wolves of Wharton is a 6-part complete book series by Eerie Travels producer Beau Lake. It has been called dark and visceral, steamy, dramatic, and a fresh take on the werewolf mythos. If you like action, adventure, a large serving of body horror, and some steamy relations, the Wolves of Wharton series is for you. Pick it up wherever books are sold or at linktree.com/Beau__Lake.
We're back. We're back. I do want to throw one out there before we go into some fun ones, because I thought this was funny when I was looking at some of the great hoax. And I don't know if this was on your list, Mark, but in 1726,
Okay.
there was a young woman from Surrey town that caused a medical sensation. Her name was Mary Toft.
Oh,
And do you know who I'm talking about?
that's the bunny babies.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I had forgotten about that one, but that when you said that name, what was it? She went into labor.
Oh, she had people convinced that she gave birth to a litter of rabbits.
There were other animal bits too, right? Wasn't there like a cat that didn't have a liver or something? There was some gross stuff first.
Yeah.
And they came out of her nether regions, right? And then that's when the rabbit came out. 9 dead bunnies, I think.
But she basically admitted to, which this just gets into a whole thing, she admitted to stuffing these creatures up there.
Yep.
Which is kind of super gross.
They didn't catch her till like somebody caught her smuggling a rabbit into her room.
Yeah.
Right.
And she had midwives and other people that were like, oh yeah, no, that absolutely happened.
Yep. Yep.
No.
They did an autopsy on one of the bunnies and found corn and hay. So that's how they knew it couldn't have been inside her. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good. It was She could not have delivered this child. God, I remember it was like part of a hog and cat parts. I remember it was all kinds of things coming out of this lady. It was
Yes.
terrifying, terrifying, terrifying stuff. Now, we'll go, since we're in the 1700s, we'll go to 1762 here in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah. Okay. 1762.
Prince Edward, Duke of York. You should be familiar with him.
Yes.
He visited a home in London that was haunted by a ghost called Scratching Fanny.
Scratching Fanny.
Scratching Fanny. She had died of smallpox, and her loan shark lover had lent money to the landlord at a high interest rate. And then the land shark actually went to court and won on the loan. And then she died sometime after this, right, of smallpox. And when he took the house, he noticed that there were strange noises coming from the walls. And they sounded like cats scratching a chair. There were other people in the area that were hearing the noises. The landlord and his daughter were hearing it. And they decided, hey, we've got lots of people coming over wanting to learn about this. Let's hold seances and charge admission.
Oh.
And so guess what they did? They started doing that. And it got written up in the paper. So Prince Edward shows up, as well as religious leaders. The prince, like I said, he's here, and the mayor are here, and the street becomes impossible to pass through.
Oh no.
So the mayor is like having to deal with this. During the communing, right, the ghost accuses Kent of poisoning Fanny, right? That's what killed Fanny. Was the ghost. She says I was poisoned. So Kent shows up to clear his name with two doctors who attended Fanny on her deathbed, and they do the seance. And Fanny again says, "You're my killer." Now, what happens is the doctor sees the little kid where she's supposedly laying in bed summoning all these spirits. He sees her sneaking up and grabbing two pieces of wood to knock. And he was able to debunk her, and she'd hidden them under her clothes. And he was basically they were trying to frame Kent because they had lost their lawsuit against him.
Wow.
So
the extremes people will go to.
Yep. So he winds up in jail for 2 years. Even his wife gets a year in prison. So
I don't love any of that.
But the house, you can still go to it. It's still around, and it is known as the House on Cock Lane. So you can go see the Cock Lane.
House on Cock Lane?
Yep, you can go see the Cock Lane Ghost House.
Oh my God, I love that name so much. That's hysterical.
I thought you'd appreciate that one. I had to save the name for the end. If I started with that, that's all we'd have been talking about.
Yes, I want to live on Cock Lane.
Yeah.
Sorry, that probably shouldn't be nearly as funny as it is to me, but it's very funny.
Oh man, it's a classic. So
yeah.
Okay. So now we have to talk about one of my favorite people from history.
Okay.
This man has probably my favorite resume of all times.
Okay.
Started at horse trading, then he became a card shark until he got caught cheating, and then he even got into tobacco sales.
Okay.
All right. And but he accidentally, or not accidentally, burned down several of his tobacco barns and cigar shops for insurance money. So
okay.
This guy sounds like he stepped out of a Discworld novel, right?
It does. It absolutely does.
So it's 1869.
Okay.
And he got into an argument with a preacher.
Like you do.
And he was like, I don't believe in the literal truth of the Bible. And so he's like, I'm going to prove you're all idiots. So he decides to create something. And this is a man named George Hull.
Okay.
And he becomes probably one of the greatest hoaxers of all time from this. He goes back to Genesis 6:4 in the Bible. There were giants in the earth in those days, right? That's the quote.
Okay.
So he buys a giant slab of gypsum in
Like you
Iowa,
do.
and then he hires a couple sculptors to carve out a 10-foot tall giant.
Oh, wow.
And then he takes that giant over 1,000 miles away by train and wagon to his cousin's farm, the Newell farm in Cardiff, New York.
Okay.
And in the dead of night, they dig a pit and bury the giant.
The giant.
This giant carving that they made.
Okay.
Normally, you would immediately want to show, hey, we did this, right? I've made this hoax. No, he waits a year, almost a year.
Okay.
And then they finally, Newell hires 2 men to dig up a well. And on October 16th, 1869, they discover the giant.
Dun, dun, dun.
And word spreads like wildfire, right?
Yeah.
And people come from town. So Newell erects a tent and starts charging people 50 cents to enter. And then word gets to New York. And a conglomerate of like entrepreneurs start buying shares of the Cardiff Giant, as it is known, and they start traveling it around. They take it to Syracuse, they take it to Albany, and then of course they take it to New York City. And as it's suddenly exploding, one of our greatest showmen of all time, the greatest showman of all time, P.T. Barnum himself, comes up to them and says, I will buy it for $50,000, which would probably be about a little over $1 million, I guess, with inflation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's a giant. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. But they said no. They refused him because they were making money selling it 50 cents a pop. So
That's
they
true.
thought they could do better. So Barnum, being Barnum, he makes a copy.
Like
He hires a guy to make a copy, and then he parades it down Broadway with 12 horses and 100 men marching alongside it. So the imposter becomes more famous than the authentic Cardiff Giant. With authentic, we're using air quotes.
Oh God, I was gonna say.
Yeah, is like 2 blocks away and can't get any guests, and he's making millions off of it because that's what Barnum did.
Yeah.
And now what happens with that is a lot of other giants start appearing from all these other circuses that are like, well, if Barnum can do it, we can do it. We can get our own giant. Oh, we dug this giant up somewhere. We dug this giant up somewhere, and all this. So it finally just winds up in like state fairs and bought and sold a bunch of times, the original, and it finally broke in half in 1940s. Somebody broke it off at the knees. It did make a couple tours after that. Now it's at the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, Connecticut. I went and saw it many, many years ago, and it's pretty impressive. Now, I remember growing up in West Virginia and reading about when they did excavations of the mounds, and they would find of the mound builders, and they would find giant skeletons in them. And then the Smithsonian would come and take them.
Oh.
But then you go and ask the Smithsonian about this, and they go, no, we don't have any skeletons. What are you talking about? We never know giants. These were things that were in my history books, and now they no longer exist. So
why do you think that is?
I don't know. I can't figure it out. And that's why I'm like, the Cardiff Giant is what they all point to. They all go, oh, it's Cardiff Giant or something like the Cardiff Giant. And I'm like, no, this was in a mound. Why are they hiding it? And that's when I go, okay, am I falling for a hoax, or did I misread something as a kid? That's a lot of us who grew up in the Midwest go, wait a minute, I remember giant skeletons being dug out of the mounds, or at least reading them in my history books. I don't know. And I've got newspaper articles pointing to, oh, they dug up a giant skeleton and men from the Smithsonian came and took it. I
Yeah.
like to think maybe these men from the Smithsonian were related to X and wanted to make sure that they didn't show up.
Oh,
All right, I got
kind of
two
makes
more
Okay.
that I want to talk about real quick. And the first one is actually kind of a two for itself. There was the Piltdown Man. So Charles Darwin released his theories that there's a missing link, right?
Okay.
Between apes and man. And in 1912, a British man named Charles Dawson said he found in a gravel pit in Piltdown, he found a skull, a fossilized skull. And he
Okay.
built the model together, and it basically had an ape jaw and a human brain. And it becomes that suddenly England is the birthplace of modern humanity.
What?
Yeah, exactly. And the
The
Royal
English are so interesting, aren't they?
the Royal Society is all in on this because they didn't really have much fossil records in England, right? They were, Australopithecines dug up in South Africa. We can't have them be the origin of man. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Now, some people immediately are like, this is wrong. It can't be.
Okay.
And then in 1915, he's like, oh, found a second one. So 3 years later,
Okay.
we're good. And so a lot of people are like, oh, that's enough. 2 forms of evidence. It's real.
That's how that works, but
And
okay.
then it takes until 1953, 40 years
Wow.
for scientists to actually have enough technology to date the Piltdown. And they discovered that it's basically 500 years old and not 1,000,000 years old. And they also realized that the jaw was an orangutan whose teeth had been filed to resemble human. Now, most of the people were already dead by the 1950s, right? Involved in this. So nobody really knows who did this. But one of my favorite theories is there was a man who lived near there,
Uh-huh.
might have had the money and the gumption to actually set those things in stone because he used to hang out in that quarry. And that man is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Okay.
So, and since he was constantly mocked by scientists for his belief in spiritualism, he might have actually done this just to spite the scientists, right?
I kind of love that, not gonna lie.
Yeah. The precursor to that, though, was he had found another thing, which was called the toad in the hole. Have you heard of this?
No, the toad in the hole?
Toad in the hole. It was basically in 1901, he unveiled this mummified toad discovered when quarriers broke open a flint nodule. So basically like a geode.
Okay.
And there was a mummified toad inside it. And so what he figured was that a baby toad had crawled into this rock and then got bigger inside and couldn't escape and only lived by eating bugs that came close to the little hole.
Okay.
Whether he really thought that or anything, who knows? Dawson, because of the Piltdown Man, because of this, he became known as the Wizard of Sussex because he was finding all these sensational discoveries. And supposedly he could always say he was fooled by the workers if this was fake.
Yeah.
Like that. So, but basically the secret is you just took a mummified frog and stuffed it into a rock.
Well, that, and I mean, I guess it's possible that, I don't think it could crawl into, but who knows, like how. So we've seen some weird fossilizations of things, and
Yeah.
depending on the type of rock, because you get into the whole, like we've seen when volcanoes or other things like that have exploded or things have happened that things get trapped, fossils, right? But a mummification, I think that's a bit ridiculous.
Right. And then the last one before we get into our last main event.
Okay.
This one, I mean, we talked about War of the Worlds. We talked about all this. Now, do you know about the what is it? It's got this crazy name. Hold on, I've got to pull it up here. Ready? Because it's the Kensington Runestone.
No, what is the Kensington Runestone?
Okay, late 1800s, right? Archaeologists are basically pillaging historical sites, where they're basically looting everything, put it in personal collections, selling it. Poor Indiana Jones, that belongs in a museum, wasn't around yet. So there were a lot of hoaxes and stuff coming out of this. And the Kensington runestone is something like this. So in 1898, a Swedish immigrant named Olaf Oman finds this massive stone slab on his farm in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
And the tablet was inscribed with runes.
Okay.
And it basically describes Scandinavian explorers deep in North America, way before Columbus would ever gotten here.
Okay.
And it says basically, we are 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vineland through the West. We had a camp by a lake with 2 skerries, 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out and fished one day, and after we came home, we found 10 of our men red with blood and dead. AVM.
Wow.
Save us from evil. We have 10 of party by the sea to look after our ships. 14 days journey from the island in our year 1362.
Wow.
So, wow, you come home from your fishing party and a third of your crew is massacred. What do you do, Erika?
Nope. I'm
You
done.
noped out, right?
I
Nope.
noped out. I would have noped out. I wouldn't. Yep.
Nope. This
Gone.
guy decides to chisel a giant stone tablet, 200
Wow.
pounds, and this is his survival note, right?
Oh my gosh. Like, that's so ridiculous, right?
That reminds us of the Dare Stones, right?
Yeah.
What we talked about. So some people still say this is a genuine article, right?
Well, some people are dumb.
But it's pretty obvious it's a forgery, because some of the runes that are used were no longer used by the modern 14th century. Some were used were more modern runes. Some were ancient. Plus, the rock didn't even look like, if it had been there for 500 years in Minnesota, freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, it probably wouldn't have looked as smooth as it did.
You mean it would have had wear and tear to it?
Yeah, and I think this guy was just trying to say, hey, a lot of people were upset with the Swedes in that area at the time because they had no true heritage. So this is
my gosh. That's so ridiculous.
This would have been a way to say, we were here first, right?
Yeah.
That's the Kensington runestone. Okay. So our last great hoax for April Fools, we got to talk about this guy, because we are going to his festival. All right. We are going to be talking about the greatest hoax, I think, of modern times, even though it's not really modern. And that is the Hodag.
I didn't realize until you told me that earlier that this was a hoax.
Oh, no. The body of a dragon, gnarly skin, smelled of buzzard meat and skunk perfume. Eugene Simeon Shepherd, the terrible brute with the strain of an ox, the ferocity of a bear, and the cunning of a fox, tore apart the hunting dogs he and his friends used to corner the beast. They shot it with heavy rifles and large bore squirt guns loaded with poisonous water, and they couldn't kill it. Finally, after hours of struggle,
squirt guns with poisonous water out hunting with me. That is what I take when I am going after the mighty Hodag. Okay, continue.
And after it couldn't kill it, they brought out the farmer's secret weapon, dynamite.
Oh, that's a secret weapon.
That's the secret weapon. So the October 1893 edition of the Near North newspaper was the first time it was in the newspaper, and he blew it up. Now, 3 years later, he claimed to have captured it live.
Oh, so.
And he showed it in a dimly lit tent at the first ever Oneida County Fair.
Okay.
And basically, he and a friend basically created the creature out of wood and hides from a tannery. and they basically used it as a puppet and growling and hissing. And then they quickly scurried people out saying, run, it's for your own safety. Get out of here. Don't take too close a look at it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But, he saw this dude, he saw the timber boom was ending.
Yeah.
And he needed something to get people up there. So he created this creature, and we will post the picture in our socials of this that made the newspaper. And of course, since he had the live one, the Smithsonian was like, well, we want to see it. And it died.
Oh, it died. It died. I'm so sorry.
It expired. So it
That's
has
so
shuffled
crazy.
off its mortal coil. So,
Wow. But I'm glad we're going to the festival for it.
yeah. We're not going to go into the details on this guy that, he was kind of a caricature and all that. But if you go back, now he came up with this, right?
Yeah.
We've got to go back a little bit. There was a pamphlet from that you can get in the Wisconsin Historical Society that talks about Paul Bunyan and some of his great things. And he mentioned some of the creatures that lived in this area. So I'm going to read just a quick little thing and then we'll wrap up for the day. And it was living in the woods near logging camps were numerous wild animals. Some were very wild and fierce, and others harmless. The hillside plover laid square eggs so they would not roll downhill. The upland trout builds its nest in trees, making it very difficult to catch. The side hill dodger has 2 short legs on the uphill side. The pinnacle grouse has only 1 wing. This enables it to fly in only one direction around the tops of conical hills. Snow snakes are very poisonous and are very active in the winter months, so one must wear proper shoes. The hodag, with an armored back and a tail with great jaws and claws, and the rumpus fusel were beasts of great ferocity. And it goes on.
Wow.
But the hodag and the rumpus fusel were definitely there and listed in this pamphlet. So the stories predate the hoax, right?
Yeah.
The legends are there. Now, the logging camps in the area, the hodag gets its name from a hoe to dig, and the mattocks, which is a pickaxe. So hodag, that's where we get the term, we think. And that was what you would call a great beast out there, right?
Yeah.
I think my other favorite monster that he mentions is the hide behind, which watches its prey from behind trees, that was always looking for hapless lumberjacks. And then the worst nuisance to lumberjacks was the axe-handled hound. And it prowls about at night and eats axe handles. So cords of axe handles were the only thing that were not eaten.
Wow.
So anyway, that's some of the greatest hoaxes of all time. But the Hodag Festival,
Yeah.
is your travel, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's in the town of Rhinelander. Their school mascot is the Hodag.
I would love to go to school with a mascot that's a cryptid instead of just like a panther or something. I want to go when it's a cryptid.
Mm-hmm. Well, near you, you've got the catamount, which is now a cryptid because it's now an extinct creature. But
that's not a cryptid. That was an actual legitimate creature that we ran
possibly
out of population.
Yeah, but possibly still seen in the area. So
True.
Now, some of the magazines and newspapers back then wrote about the Hodag like it was real, so that's why it, expanded everywhere. So we love the creature. We are so excited to be part there. There is the Hodag Museum,
Yes.
Hodag store up there, and again the Hodag Festival, which we will be at, and can't wait to see it. So, my goodness, I love all these. I would recommend you also try a toad in the hole recipe, which is a classic of British food, which is basically bangers and Yorkshire pudding mixed together. So it's a Yorkshire pudding embedded with crisp pork sausages and then covered in an onion gravy. So I can't have the gravy, but I could have the rest of it. So
that sounds like artery clogging stuff, my friend.
Can't go wrong with that. So, my goodness, gang. One last note. We talked about the man who created the giant penguin in Clearwater Beach, Tony Signorini.
Yeah.
His son still has the shoes that were these giant iron shoes with that he would basically stand on one leg and swivel and jump to the other leg so it would have this giant stride, right? And he was trying to create this sea monster that he had seen and nobody believed him. So he was trying to show that this creature could exist there. And then the Smithsonian sends their expert in and says, "Oh, the only thing that created this was a giant penguin." And then people started saying, "Oh, we saw the penguin. We saw the penguin." Students from flying school. "Oh, we saw the penguin when we flew over Honeymoon Island." All this stuff.
You
It's just
gotta love when people jump on your made up bandwagon.
right. Exactly. Old Three Toes was what the creature was, what he wanted people to see. But it turned out, we joked about those three-toed footprints. What the heck? Where did he get the idea? And we found out from his son that the reason he made those shoes was he had seen a footprint of a dinosaur footprint, a picture of one, and it was a three-toed footprint, and that's why he came up with the idea of making the three-toed feet.
Well, at least it started somewhere, in fact, my friend.
Not
So-
realizing it looked an awful lot like a giant penguin footprint.
That is hysterical. And so travelers out there, there's lots of this stuff you can go and see in different places, but let's keep the hoaxes down to a dull roar. Let's not dress up in Bigfoot suits that we find in the costume shops and try to do that, because the real hunters that are looking, it makes it definitely difficult.
Yeah.
And with that, Mark, what do you have to say to our listeners?
I'm going to say thank you, gang, for tuning in for this April Fool's Fest. We had a lot of fun. Hoaxes are a part of this business, so we have to separate fact from fiction. So yes, we do look at these and go, okay, they're fun, tongue-in-cheek, stuff like that. Do they distract from the real stories? Yes, they do. So that's why, yeah, they're part of the folklore, they're part of the legends, they're part of the fun, but they also can cause problems for those of us trying to find the truth and separate the truth from the fiction. So you've got to look at everything extra hard in this field, and that that does take away some of it. And for every hoax that does get proven, that's one less dollar that's going to be spent by a real scientist researching this. So please, gang, don't create hoaxes. Don't go out there popping your bones to make knocking sounds in a seance. Don't go out there with a stick under your dress, and certainly don't put dead animal parts places where they should not be. But all that said, we are enjoying the history of these. We enjoy the legacies of these. We love that the Hodag has a festival, and we can't wait to be part of it. We're going to enjoy our trip out there. There's some other monsters we're going to look for while we're up there, and some ghostly places that we're going to visit. So that's part of the fun. You go to these places, enjoy them for what they are, the spirit in which they were intended. Definitely, when you get a chance, look out the Cardiff Giant and all that fun stuff. I think that's all that can be said, gang. We will be out there. We will be looking ourselves, and we will keep an open mind. And then I think I'm going to go pull out a VHS tape and see if I can have Jonathan Frakes tell me whether it's real or if I should realize that it wasn't real and just a hoax. And we will see you on the other side.